They believed they had the ideal strategy. No loose ends, no witnesses, and no second chances. You were intended to be nothing more than a memory, a problem eliminated before it could arise. They paid for your quiet, sending their finest to ensure you never walked again. But look at yourself. Breathing. Watching. They said you'd never get to where you are now. And now, their empire isn't simply crumbling. It's ablaze. This is not only a legal dispute. This is a reckoning. They spent years preparing their scheme, which turned out to be the trap that sealed their destiny. What about the twist? They have their own enforcer. The person who was meant to take you out switched sides and revealed everything. Imagine the fear, the scrambling, and the frantic efforts to reverse what has already been done. They believed they had everything under control. They believed they could alter reality. They were not prepared for you, however. So, sit tight. The Chosen One. This is not simply about survival. This is dominance. They wanted you gone, but they just gave you the stage. The world now knows precisely who they are. And the greatest part? There is nothing they can do to prevent it. They were confident it had ended. Their triumph was sealed with ink and hubris. But as the doors swung open and you entered, unharmed and unaffected, the air in the room deepened with incredulity. Their assurance had served as a protective barrier, but now it has crumbled under the weight of the impossible. The meticulously constructed case disintegrated just in front of their eyes, and the authority they once had vanished from their grip. The ones who governed fortunes from the shadows now face an unknown power. One who didn't know did not shatter, and didn't forget. They believed time was their buddy. However, months of stillness meant that the past had been buried permanently. However, when their perfectly positioned pieces failed to move as predicted, the events they controlled suddenly spiraled out of their hands. The illusion of their dominance fractured the hand that had previously been their executioner, never missing a target. Until now, a last assault aimed to be quick and unexpected. A flawlessly set trap disintegrated at the exact time it was supposed to shut. Their formerly precise computations were suddenly plagued with mistakes. Their confidence is deteriorating. This is a coincidence number. This was beyond their grasp. A power they had never anticipated. One that didn't need guns or threats to change the tide. The equilibrium had altered as a result of something considerably more deep than resistance. Their own silent instrument had found its voice. Those who had followed pathways paved with obedience paused, not because of fear, but because for the first time they recognized themselves outside their mission. A cog in the machine has gained self-awareness. With that understanding came destruction. There was no pleading for compassion. There are no frantic efforts at negotiating. Those who had previously ordered destruction stood transfixed, not by force, but by the weight of what they had put in motion. Their hands, which had previously served as tools, had transformed into something very else. What was once an unshakable conviction has become a question without an answer. An unraveling thread in a fabric they believed was unbreakable. And at that moment, the quiet enforcer, on whom they had blindly trusted, turned not to strike, but to bring to light the realities they had hidden. Their kingdom, founded on whispers and control, is suddenly exposed to the harsh reality of consequences. They had created a faultless structure meant to resist any assault. Yet, in their hubris, they created the same instrument of their demise. The tide they believed they controlled had turned, carrying them into the abyss. They had created a countdown for others, and it had never marked someone else's death. It had been ticking away towards their own reckoning. This was not a fate negotiation. This was not justice yielding to convenience. This was the inevitable, demanding its rightful place. And they saw you standing where they said you'd never be. The assurance they had held to had crumbled, and their own creation sat alongside you. They are also no longer there, but the last witness to their demise. If your heart is full of God's blessings, now is the moment to let that love shine. By clicking the Super Thank You button and donating $20 or more, you are not just supporting this platform, you are sowing seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your giving reflects God's wealth, a gift that goes beyond what you can perceive. Step into your mission. Be a receptacle for His grace. Give with trust, and see His kingdom grow through you. You were meant for more. The exact tools they created to gain dominance were the chisels that carved their demise. The power they previously held with impunity has gone through their fingers. No longer a weapon, but proof signed in writing with consequences. The area that had previously yielded to their desire no longer did. Although no decision had been given, the result was engraved into the quiet. What they believed had been eliminated was only waiting for the right opportunity to reappear. They had included a disappearance into the screenplay, but the story reinvented itself. A trail of receipts. They ignored voices they believed would remain silent, as well as secret realities that refused to be concealed. What was supposed to be a forgotten deed became indisputable proof, trapping them in the same destiny they sought to avoid. This is your time. Subscribe and let us attain greatness. Their kingdom flourished in secret, but now their identities were inscribed on records that could not be burnt. The calm they had paid for had turned into headlines, and their activities had been scrutinized in ways they had never expected. Their reign had always been based on one thing: quiet. Their effect was not intended to be questioned. Their rulings are not intended to be disputed. Every gap in their journey was based on the lack of a challenge, but they never expected the impossible. A survivor stands in defiance, accompanied by the same power they formerly relied on to eradicate all threats. Their misdeeds weighed heavily, and this time, there was no way out, no neatly deleted records, no vanishing voices. The arena where they formerly commanded results is now holding them responsible. The confidence they previously wore like armor became fragile beneath the weight of their abilities. No more control. Justice does not just protect. It disassembles piece by piece until there is nowhere to hide. What started out as a premeditated blow against an annoyance quickly unraveled. They were unable to contain the mechanisms they envisioned. Infallible. Crumbled. Hidden cache trails emerged, carefully organized denials crumbled, and each action taken to conceal the truth became another nail in the coffin of their power. What they had formerly controlled was no longer within their authority. They wanted to remove a variable, but in doing so, they unleashed forces that could not be suppressed. What should have been a locked door swung open, revealing discoveries they could never have predicted. The system they had exploited with ease had shattered under the weight of treachery, and the hands that previously obeyed commands now signed confessions. Their authority, which was based on unwavering allegiance, had rotted from within. The once unchallenged energy had withered beneath the brightness of exposure. Those who had previously operated in the shadows were no longer hiding. Their murmurs became recordings. Their secrets became proof. And the same structure they thought was invincible fell, not by external force, but via its own dissolving strands. No weapon made against you will flourish. Isaiah 5417. They created their weapons in the dark, believing that their preparations were infallible. They talked, planned, and tugged every rope. They believed they had the ability to change destiny, but they never realized who was pinning the narrative. They erected a structure so tall and defended that they believed nothing could harm it until the foundation broke under their feet. The stone they rejected, which they attempted to bury, became the foundation of their demise. See, survival was never only about weathering the storm. It was about becoming the storm. They didn't just fail to delete you. They provide the groundwork for your ascent. Every trap they set, every plot they devised, and every whispered plan intended to silence you only made your voice louder. What they intended as a vanishing became a protest. Every effort to remove your existence became a new chapter in a narrative too compelling to ignore. The structure they felt was invincible did not just disintegrate. It was ripped apart instantly, not piece by piece, not over time. It disintegrated so totally and openly that no sign of their power remained. What began in secrecy ended in exposure. What started as a subtle, planned approach evolved into a full-fledged, inexorable reckoning. There were no whispered settlements, escape plans, or second chances. This was not just a setback. It was complete annihilation. They created a mechanism to defend themselves, but it ultimately turned against them. The hands, having cleaned up their messes, were now completing the papers that sealed their destiny. The same individuals they had trusted to falsify the facts stood motionless, watching their kingdom crumble in real time. You don't have to describe how it occurred. They know. They sense it. They see it behind every closed door. Every discussion that changes whenever your name is mentioned. The judgment was not merely announced. It was sensed. Nothing they depended on could bear the weight of reality. Lawyers, money, and influence. Everything was destroyed by the fire they started for themselves. They assumed this was about power. They never understood. This was about purpose. They mistaken control for the dominion strategy of authority. They believed they could influence outcomes, but they never considered the one thing they could never control: the favor that comes before you, the invisible force that flips every weapon back upon the wielder. And now they are hesitant. They stop before saying your name. They are watching every move, not because they want to attack, but because they know they cannot. Not anymore. The battleground is no longer theirs. They constructed it. They established the rules. They stacked the odds. However, the game was never theirs to win. You're here for a purpose. If you sense the call, respond by clicking the join button. You have access to special information, in-depth insights, and a strong community willing to join you on your adventure. This is not just a membership. It is an awakening, an opportunity to completely embody your divine destiny and seize the path destined for you. Do not wait. Step ahead. Join the chosen. Their kingdom had always been built around a single belief. Control was total. They acted with the assurance of those who determined results and thought power could be manufactured, secured, and wielded precisely. However, their most serious error was confusing what could be touched for what could be controlled. They misjudged, assuming that their reach stretched beyond what was ever theirs, allowing them to control every instrument on which they depended. Intimidation, persuasion, and force were made impotent. Every plan constructed in the shadows crumbled the instant it encountered something beyond calculation. The error was presuming that presence equaled vulnerability and patience implied capitulation. They prepared to face an opponent they could see, but what unraveled them was something they hadn't anticipated: a power impervious to their control and unaffected by their machinations. And when the time came, no amount of riches, duplicity, or strategically placed piece in their game could prevent the inevitable. They disregarded every warning and shrugged off every setback, believing that their power could outweigh the consequences. When their well-planned strategies started to unravel, they looked for answers, blaming ill timing, misplaced trust, and unanticipated failures. However, they never imagined that what stood in their way was not happenstance or plain opposition, but something beyond their control. Immune to fear and unmoved by force. Their failure was sealed when they focused their ambitions at something that could not be shattered. What they thought was a search was really a gradual march to their own demise. Every frantic move just exacerbated the abyss under their feet. Every cover-up revealed more of their dishonesty. The more they battled to keep control, the more the barriers surrounding them collapsed. They anticipated quiet, a quick and untraceable resolution. But what they got was a reckoning that couldn't be avoided. Shields do not simply defend. It returns every plan, deceit, and false feeling of power back onto those who use them, acting as a constant reminder that there are forces beyond human control. Realize your potential. Subscribe now, and let's make something spectacular. This was not just a setback. It was complete annihilation. They created a mechanism to defend themselves, but it ultimately turned against them. The hands, having cleaned up their messes, were now completing the papers that sealed their destiny. The same individuals they had trusted to falsify the facts stood motionless, watching their kingdom crumble in real time. You don't have to describe how it occurred. They know. They sense it. They see it behind every closed door. Every discussion that changes whenever your name is mentioned. The judgment was not merely announced. It was sensed. Nothing they depended on could bear the weight of reality. Lawyers, money, and influence. Everything was destroyed by the fire they started for themselves. They assumed this was about power. They never understood. This was about purpose. They mistaken control for the dominion strategy of authority. They believed they could influence outcomes, but they never considered the one thing they could never control: the favor that comes before you, the invisible force that flips every weapon back upon the wielder. And now they are hesitant. They stop before saying your name. They are watching every move, not because they want to attack, but because they know they cannot. Not anymore. The battleground is no longer theirs. They constructed it. They established the rules. They stacked the odds. However, the game was never theirs to win. You're here for a purpose. If you sense the call, respond by clicking the join button. You have access to special information, in-depth insights, and a strong community willing to join you on your adventure. This is not just a membership. It is an awakening, an opportunity to completely embody your divine destiny and seize the path destined for you. Do not wait. Step ahead. Join the chosen. Their kingdom had always been built around a single belief. Control was total. They acted with the assurance of those who determined results and thought power could be manufactured, secured, and wielded precisely. However, their most serious error was confusing what could be touched for what could be controlled. They misjudged, assuming that their reach stretched beyond what was ever theirs, allowing them to control every instrument on which they depended. Intimidation, persuasion, and force were made impotent. Every plan constructed in the shadows crumbled the instant it encountered something beyond calculation. The error was presuming that presence equaled vulnerability and patience implied capitulation. They prepared to face an opponent they could see. But what unraveled them was something they hadn't anticipated: a power impervious to their control and unaffected by their machinations. And when the time came, no amount of riches, duplicity, or strategically placed piece in their game could prevent the inevitable. They disregarded every warning and shrugged off every setback, believing that their power could outweigh the consequences. When their well-planned strategies started to unravel, they looked for answers, blaming ill timing, misplaced trust, and unanticipated failures. However, they never imagined that what stood in their way was not happenstance or plain opposition, but something beyond their control, immune to fear and unmoved by force. Their failure was sealed when they focused their ambitions at something that could not be shattered. What they thought was a search was really a gradual march to their own demise. Every frantic move just exacerbated the abyss under their feet. Every cover-up revealed more of their dishonesty. The more they battled to keep control, the more the barriers surrounding them collapsed. They anticipated quiet, a quick and untraceable resolution. But what they got was a reckoning that couldn't be avoided. Shields do not simply defend. It returns every plan, deceit, and false feeling of power back onto those who use them, acting as a constant reminder that there are forces beyond human control. Realize your potential. Subscribe now, and let's make something spectacular. And when the ultimate verdict was delivered, it was not just a choice. It was a statement, an admission that they had lost much more than just a lawsuit. The timing was no coincidence. Every impediment, delay, and change in circumstances was timed with an invisible precision that they had never anticipated. The very fabric of their control ripped at the edges, unable to retain the voices they believed they had hushed rose at the critical time. Their meticulously knit deceit crumbled under the weight of overwhelming evidence, revealing itself in unexpected ways. They arrived at times when they couldn't stop. This was not luck. It was not by chance. It was something far greater, ensuring that no lie could withstand the weight of reality. Their demise did not conclude with a judgment. It persisted in ways they could not have anticipated. It was not only a legal failure, it was the eroding of all they previously stood on, the authority that slipped so easily from their hands. Those who had earlier stood with them now paused. Their plans crashed before they could even begin. Whereas they used to stroll without hesitation, they now second-guess every stride. each action bearing the danger of more exposure. They could feel the change, even if they didn't admit it. They had lost their feeling of control. They'll call it a mistake, treachery, or unanticipated circumstances. But deep down, they know what really occurred. They battled against something far bigger than themselves, something that could not be suppressed, rewritten, or reversed. The system they created to maintain their dominance became the same factor that worked against them, because corruption can only be hidden for so long before being exposed. And in the end, every action they took to destroy became another step toward their own demise. This was never just about survival. It was about destroying the idea of their superiority. What they lost was not merely a war, but the whole core of their power. Where confidence previously dominated, their names are now spoken with caution. It's not because they no longer want to strike. It's that they've realized the cost of attempting. It was never a straightforward encounter. It was a change in power that exposed them in ways they had not foreseen. The scales did not just tilt. They crumbled beneath their own weight. Their demise was even bigger than they had anticipated. Even their hubris will not bring them to confront that power again. This win has left an indelible impression. It is obvious. No countermeasure, correction, or frantic effort to recapture their power can undo what has already been initiated. They meticulously planned their approach, certain that they had complete control over every action. Every choice was carefully considered. Every resource is strategically exploited. Every vulnerability was addressed. But none of it mattered. They erred not because their methods were faulty, but because their opponent was never who they believed he was. Their plots were uncovered before they could be carried out. Their deceitful whispers were already being demolished before they could take action. What they mistakenly called luck was never chance. It was foresight beyond their understanding. Every effort to trap you unraveled before it could take form. Every meticulously planned ambush was rendered ineffective before it could be executed. They assumed that the conflict was theirs to dictate, but it was never theirs at all. They didn't comprehend the struggle was never waged alone. Their dependence on statistics, trickery, and raw force made them oblivious to truth. They were unable to manage the weaponry on which they relied. Their tactics failed, and the individuals they trusted to carry out their will were the ones who disassembled it. What was intended to be a quick execution became damning evidence against them. The hands, which had been conditioned to obey without question, paused. The enforcers on whom they relied were immobilized, incapacitated, or seized by forces well beyond human control. Those who had previously functioned in the shadows were now in the light, serving as voices disclosing the truth rather than extensions of power. What they thought would be their last step turned out to be their biggest exposure. The operations that are hidden. What had previously been hidden by quiet was now visible, and no amount of denial could erase what had already revealed. The power they thought was unshakable has split beyond repair. This was more than simply survival. This was the very evidence of their demise. And now they know the truth. They never wanted to believe. No strategy, force, or deceit can ever be sufficient to reverse what has already been chosen. It's not that they can't contact you. It is that any effort to do so is thwarted before it even starts. Your quest to greatness begins here. Subscribe today, and we'll make it happen. For years, they moved freely, determining results before the first move was made. Every decision was taken in private, since they were certain that nothing was beyond their control. Every resistance was eliminated before it could arise. However, the earth under them has changed, and they are experiencing it in ways they never expected. The power they previously held so easily has slipped from their hands, not by mistake, but by purpose. It was never just one loss. This represented the breakdown of a whole illusion. Their trusted systems failed them. The influence they relied on shattered, and the assurance they once had transformed to uncertainty. Every word is now metered, and every move is studied, because they comprehend what they are really up against. It was never simply about evading their clutches. It was about completely breaking free from their control over you. The minute the truth was proclaimed with indisputable power, a line was set that they would not dare cross again. not for a lack of purpose, but because they understand the repercussions. Their hubris brought them here, and now they're imprisoned in the aftermath. They maintain a guarded quiet. Names, once spoken confidently, are now murmured with care, and discussions halt when your presence is mentioned. Those who previously stood firm against you now step softly, unsure, conscious they have lost something more than a lawsuit. They abandon the idea that you might be touched, controlled, or erased. Every motion has become slower. Every instruction faded into a whisper. They traverse their own areas with the weight of knowing that the entity that brought down their kingdom is still watching. They created a precise machine based on secrecy, quiet, and total control that allowed for no departure. Every precaution was taken to guarantee that the truth never revealed. However, their doom eventually came from inside. They trusted these hands to carry out their plans. Their will became the tool of their own destruction, and the person they chose to delete their name became the voice that ensured their legacy would be one of failure. Every meticulously planned strategy failed in a courtroom when their own enforcer was the ultimate witness against them. This wasn't a strategy. This was not a lawful move. This was a reckoning they never expected. The ruling did not just mark the end of a war. It left an indelible mark on their legacy, altering how they would be remembered forever. No longer uttered with respect, their names now bear the weight of infamy. Their narrative is not one of quiet loss, but rather of a breakdown so severe that it became a show. People who formerly controlled narratives become cautionary tales. Their treasured weapon became their worst disadvantage. The battlefield they once dominated became the scene of their humiliation. They set out to provide an ending. However, they provided indisputable evidence that no power they could call was larger than the one opposing them. No subterfuge, stratagem, or effort to recapture their grasp will alter what has already been written. The message is clear. Nothing organized against you will ever succeed, not even by the hands they once trusted. The earth underneath them did not suddenly change. It crumbled completely. Those who formerly walked confidently now pause. An unexpected conclusion crushed their confidence. What they lost was not transient. It is irretrievable. There is no reset, no restoration to the strength they previously had. They believed they were the builders of destiny, the enforcers of quiet, the ones who determined who would rise and fall. However, they were the ones who were ultimately undone. Every effort to delete you was another step towards their self-destruction. Every hurdle they threw at you confirmed what they didn't grasp. You're not standing alone. What surrounds you is beyond their grasp. Untouchable, unshakable, unavoidable. They sought to silence a voice, but instead magnified it. The very opposition they put up against you became testimony of your persistence. Their instruments of devastation were the very proof that sealed their demise. Where they anticipated to find you shattered, they now see something they cannot explain. The presence of something they could never overcome. They won't remember you as an opponent. They'll remember you as the power they couldn't defeat. Their defeat is more than just a loss. It's a reckoning. The authority they held so easily vanished before their eyes. Not because they were outmaneuvered, but because their authority was never genuine in the first place. They mistaken their influence for invincibility and their plans for permanence. But nothing is based upon falsehood. Fear and manipulation may stand when the basis is challenged. They are now watching silently, forced to accept what they can't alter. What should have been your demise became your testimony. What they intended to bury has only grown larger. It's no longer simply about survival. This is the beginning of something long-lasting, larger than they could have anticipated. Your tale is not just yours. It serves as a light for those who remain in the shadows, hoping for confirmation that the improbable may happen. Speak, share, let your path be noticed. Others need to understand that no plot, force, or resistance can erase what is designed to rise. This is more than just a triumph. It represents the beginning of a legacy that will go well beyond this moment. Let them witness it. Let them understand. Let them realize that what is true cannot be reversed.